Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Stranger to Meeting course. If you want to book meetings with your ideal customers, but they currently have no idea who you are or what you do, this is the course for you. I'm Michael Hansen, your instructor and the CEO of Cosmic Growth. We're a sales, training, and enablement company that has trained over 10,000 people from 21-year-old BDRs generating meetings for tech companies to 60-year-old real estate professionals closing 8-figure deals. I've listened to thousands of cold calls, read thousands of emails, checked out thousands of LinkedIn profiles, and during this course, I'll talk about what I've learned along the way. I'm a Brit, born and bred in London, as you might tell from my accent, but have been fortunate enough to live and work in Colombia, Spain, Germany, and South Africa. So I've seen a lot of different styles of sales, culture, and business. As well as a CEO, I'm a glorified salesperson and still sell our services on a daily basis. So I also see what is and isn't working through my own deals. And during this course, you'll hear some of my own stories. I've also made a lot of mistakes along the way. 10 years ago, my calls, emails, and pitches were awful. So I know what sucks from my own experience and can share those so you don't have to make those same mistakes. This course is focused on business development and pipeline generation. So we're mainly going to be focusing on how to generate new deals and logos. We'll cover ideal customer profiles, cold calling, objections, email writing, LinkedIn, videos, voice notes, mindset, sequences, and voicemail. So quite a few topics. But before we do that, in this first module, I'm going to tell you the biggest problem most sellers have, which is that they don't think about their buyers and only think about themselves. Here's a tough pill to swallow. Most buyers hate salespeople. And why is that? Because most sellers think more about themselves and their commission check than their buyer. I call this the transactional mindset, and it's why there exists the stereotype of the sleazy salesperson. It's manifested in long emails that use the words I and company name, talking more about yourself and not talking about your customers. Cold calls where the salesperson talks twice as much as the other person. And generally, when the buyer feels like the salesperson doesn't listen to them, understand what they're saying, and is constantly trying to push them into a corner they don't want to be in. And all this does is show the buyer that you're only interested in yourself if you can make money out of them. And it's why salespeople have such a bad reputation in society. So what's the opposite of this transactional mindset? It's a world in which buyers feel heard and understood and feel like the sellers care about them, their goals, and their challenges. If you do this, you'll be seen as an advisor and not that sleazy salesperson. And naturally, the customer will want to work with you and you'll generate more pipeline and close more deals. So how can we understand our buyers better? By understanding their psychology and why they buy. So in this module, I'm going to be running through 7 emotions that buyers feel in a sales process and how you need to react to these emotions. These emotions are fear, desire, anger, resentment, anxiety, lethargy, doubt, and pride. And I'll break down when your buyers feel them, how you can identify them in your buyers, and what to do about them. Only 18% of buyers trust salespeople. That's according to a study by the Rain Group in which they interviewed 2,000 buyers. Often when I've mentioned this stat to CEOs or heads of sales, they reply, I'm surprised it's so high. So they think it would be even less than 1 in 5 buyers. Now, if you think, I'm not a secondhand car salesman, I sell software, commercial real estate, or big consulting projects, then your arrogance is deluded, I'm afraid. I'm a sales trainer, so I have big empathy towards salespeople. But when someone is selling me something, I still have my guard up. Training thousands of salespeople means I've seen the transactional short-term mindset that so many have. And that makes me even very cautious of sellers, even as a salesperson myself. Some other sales trainers say, I want to elevate the profession of sales. But that's not my goal here. My goal is for you to understand how fearful buyers are of salespeople. They're constantly worried you'll sell them a deal that's not in their interest, that you're trying to take as much money as possible from them. So knowing that a buyer will have their guard up with you from the start is actually super useful to understand, as you can start to think how to lower this guard. So how can you do this? How can we help drop the guard and show buyers that we actually care about them? It's with the curiosity mindset. That's the antidote to transactional mindset. Now, I learn as much from buying products as I do from selling, and I have a quick story about this. From 2017 to 2019, before setting up my business, I was the head of growth for a company and was responsible for managing their sales and marketing team. I reported to the CEO and COO, and we were looking for a marketing technology to help us generate new leads. We initially started with a list of 10 vendors and then narrowed it down to a final 3. At the time, my CEO, COO, and myself, we were all living in Medellin, Colombia, and they were 2 Americans. So we were, 3 foreigners living in Colombia, and 80% of our 200 employees were based in Colombia. Now, 2 of the vendors came on sales calls with little curiosity about why 2 Americans and a Brit were living in Colombia and had their own preconceptions. One said, I've seen the show Narcos and know all about Pablo Escobar. And in case you don't know, most Colombians are sick and tired of hearing about Pablo Escobar. They also hate the show Narcos, as Pablo Escobar is played by a Brazilian guy. So even my Spanish accent is probably better than his. But the third salesperson, Alec, was totally different. He had genuine curiosity in us and said, hey, I saw you're based in Medellin, Colombia. Heard great things from friends. How is it living out there? This then set the tone for how he was during the sales cycle. He listened attentively, showed curiosity, not just in me, but in all 3 of us, and tailored his solution exactly to our needs. So who do you think we bought from? Of course, from Alec. The tech of the other 2 vendors he was competing against was very similar, so it truly was a case of people buy from people and us buying from Alec. Now, I'm still in touch with Alec to this day, and here you can see a message he sent me when I first moved back to the UK, again, just being curious about my current situation. Now, I want you to pause the video, pick a dream customer you want to work with, and now think about why may they be scared of you as a salesperson, and how can you show curiosity to help lower the guard of that ideal buyer. Every single director, VP, manager, or C-level persona you're trying to sell to has some type of goal they're trying to reach. That's the nature of being a manager in a company. So you need to be curious about 1, what those goals are, 2, what challenges are preventing them from reaching those goals. Now, of course, you want to ask them questions about these goals and challenges if you have them on a call. But do you know what the best salespeople do? They're constantly researching those goals and challenges of their ideal buyers. I'm fortunate enough in that I've been selling to revenue leaders, marketing, sales-focused CEOs for the last 10 years. And it means I've had a lot of time to understand their world. But even if you're new in your role, you have this great thing called the internet, which you can use to research. So go use AI, Google, social media, and ask things like, what are the top 10 goals and KPIs of my buyer? Then follow that up with, what are the challenges preventing them from reaching those goals? In addition, listen to podcasts they appear on, read their articles, look at their social media posts, understand their world, and you'll start to understand what their desires and challenges are. When you've identified those goals, then think, how can you help them reach those goals? The key mindset shift here is to help them with that desire, whether they buy from you or not. Now, sleazy salespeople are too attached to deals to understand this. They don't understand if you sell someone something they don't need. 1, they'll be annoyed with you when they realize this and never, ever do business with you again. 2 is your customer support or success team are going to hate you as they now have an unrealistic project to carry out. So the best sellers, on the other hand, are the opposite. They're obsessed with helping their buyers solve problems. Now, here's a story to help show an example. I was introduced to a guy called Faraz, who is the CEO early on his entrepreneurial journey. He developed a great technology, but he didn't have a sales team to sell. So he was doing all the sales himself. They didn't have much pipeline, so his main goal was to improve his outreach and get more meetings. At Cosmic Growth, for our services businesses, we don't work with companies that have less than 3 salespeople. So when I realized he did all the selling, I explained we wouldn't be the best fit, but we had a full 1-hour call booked. So instead of saying goodbye, I said to him, hey, can you show me the messaging you're currently sending? We then spent the next 45 minutes analyzing his emails and strategy, and I gave him 10 things to change. Now, 1 year later, Faraz had hired a few salespeople, gave me a call and said, we're ready to work with you. I've been booking loads of meetings with the tactics you gave me, and I'd like you to show them to our new hires. They're now a happy customer, generating millions in revenue, and Faraz has also sent us referrals and leads. And this was all because I played the long game. I didn't have that transactional mindset we talked about earlier. I just wanted to help him solve a problem, even if he couldn't buy from us at the time. And this is really playing the long-term game, which is a lot of what I'll be showing you in this course. So now pause the video. For that same lead of earlier, think about what goals do they desire, what's preventing them from reaching those goals, and how can you help them with those challenges. Buyers can get very angry at salespeople, and often it is justified. If you've worked in sales even for 3 months, you will have made mistakes, as we're all human and flawed. And I make mistakes all the time. But often in sales, mistakes annoy our buyers. Now, I have a colleague called Lawrence Jackman, or LJ, as we call him, and he's a 60-year-old who lives a great life living remotely in Nicaragua and working there by the beach, and he does business development full-time with me. A few years ago, he sent an email to a head of sales asking, what's the biggest sales challenge you're facing right now? This was a generic email, not customized to the client. And as you'll see later in our email training module, it doesn't have any of our 5 pillars that we recommend. So the client got angry, resentful, and then responded this email. Dear Lawrence, this is truly, capital letters, the worst email I've got in a long time. I've CC'd our SDR manager for a laugh. Please try harder, include something of value for me in your email, or be provocative. Don't ask me for something as a very first engagement. Very, very bad in capital letters. Now, although Lawrence's email was bad, this response was rude, and it made me angry with this woman. But how did Lawrence react to this? Of course, with some anger. Some towards the client, as it was rude and patronizing, but also some towards himself. And actually the anger was positive, as he said to himself, how can I make this email much better than what I've sent already? So he called his boss, i.e. me, and was honest and humble enough to show me his email and her response. I was angry at how rude she was and was actually quite resentful. And resentment is typically an emotion that comes with anger. You're first angry with someone or something, and then you get resentful about it. But Lawrence was different to me. He wasn't resentful. He decided to forgive her and said, she may have had a bad day. And there's things in her personal life we have no idea about. Maybe a relative, or her pet died, or her boss was rude to her on that particular day. So for a lot of emotions in this module, remember this. Emotions are not permanent. Anger, fear, resentment, desire, they can all be transformed into something else. So after speaking to me, Lawrence created a much more customized email. This was it. Mary, how about this as an alternative? As you're an employee engagement platform, I imagine your main buyer persona is an HR leader, director, VP, etc. I also saw you're hiring a sales enablement executive. Would you be interested in some sales enablement tips for selling to HR leaders? I'm sure you can all agree this was a much better email than his first one, and the response he got is absolutely mad. So this is it. Hi there. It looks much more engaging. Sorry, I think I was a bit rude before, but I'm sure you can agree in retrospect that the feedback wasn't wholly unjustified. We all get a lot of mail. I'm headed off on maternity leave very shortly. I had to Google to see what you guys do. Always worth an intro to see who you are in an email. Maybe just saying, do you want some tips, as we're a B2B sales trading provider and helping customers like you. I know you're ultimately selling to me. No shame in that. Steve is my maternity leave cover until we have a sales enablement person on board. He is looking into how we might be able to get some short, crisp training sessions in, so it might not actually be bad timing. This response is literally night and day, yin and yang versus her first response. Lawrence was able to generate a meeting all because of his persistence and forgiveness. So her anger was no longer there, and she even apologized to Lawrence. She went from anger to empathy with Lawrence and saw that her email could even be seen as rude. So like I said before, we can always transform these emotions into something else. They're not permanent. Please pause the video now and think, when was the last time a buyer got angry with you, and what could you have done differently in this situation? If you're new to sales, then ask a colleague or your manager for a war story. That's the end of this free video. If you'd like to have unlimited access to the full course and watch the rest of the video, you can sign up in the link below.